You're listening to On Mission with Dr. Matt Davis, a podcast designed to explore the personal mission of everyday leaders. Hear from men and women who are making a difference in their corner of the world and discover what keeps them on mission. Welcome to On Mission. I am Matt Davis, and today my guest is Dr. Carl Herbster, who currently serves as the president of an organization called AdvanceUSA, which we will have the privilege to talk about just a little bit today. But he's had a long history of faithfulness in ministry, and we want to see and trace God's work in his life over those all that varied opportunities and doors that God has opened over the years. Dr. Herbster and his wife, Debbie, have been married for 54 years. Congratulations.
It's been wonderful, too. I just thank the Lord.
Well, we'll ask her about that, too, and get her opinion.
You
but
should.
They have 3 adult sons. I myself am also a member of the 3 Boys Club, so
Yes.
That's the only way to go. Matt, Mark, and Mike, that we know so well, all serving faithfully in ministry, and what a joy that is to see your children making good decisions. Amen. His first job was with Procter & Gamble Corporation as a sales representative. What were you selling?
I was in the toiletry division. I dealt with toothpaste, Crest toothpaste, Head & Shoulders shampoo.
I didn't know they needed salespeople for that. That's
well,
amazing.
that's why I would say I was more a marketer. They would call us. We had to put the product in the right shelves at the right place so people would buy more of them.
Getting it more prominently positioned. Yes. Okay. But his first Christian ministry job was as an assistant pastor and school administrator at Community Baptist Church and Christian School in South Bend, Indiana, where my son, Tim, is actually a member with his wife right now while he is in law school down there. His favorite meal is really no surprise at all, KC barbecue brisket.
Oh, Kansas City barbecue, you can't go wrong. Of course, Kansas City strip steaks. That's so much better than New York strip, not just because of the taste, but because of the liberalism of New York versus the heartland. Leaves a bad taste in your mouth. So.
Aren't there like 2 kinds of barbecue in this country, like the KC philosophy, and then there's like a
North Carolina.
Yep, you got the South.
I've lived both places, so I can tell you about both of them.
All right, well, one of them's got vinegar.
Stick with Kansas City.
Which one's the one with vinegar?
That's North Carolina.
Yeah, we don't like that stuff.
Yep.
We like the sweet KC. That's the good stuff. His favorite hobby is not golf or cricket or anything like that. It's helping churches without a pastor find a pastor.
I really enjoy working with churches. It's a joy. It's a privilege.
And your favorite sports teams, again, no surprise, the Kansas City Chiefs and the Kansas Jayhawks are his favorite sports teams, along with the Royals, I guess.
Yes, because I had the privilege early on while I was pastoring Kansas City to do chapels for the Royals and for the Kansas City Chiefs. And so I got to know players from a personal level and really enjoyed the opportunity to show them what was more important than sports or more important than making a lot of money, and that was having a personal relationship with the Lord Jesus Christ. And I've got some loyalty in the Super Bowl that's coming up. So.
Well, you got to know some pretty famous people over the years, being in the locker room with them.
I enjoyed the opportunity to be with George Brett with my sons. He would come to chapel as long as I didn't ask him to pray, and he never wanted to pray, but he would come to chapels. He's now part owner in the Royals and had the joy of leading to the Lord Bobby Bell, he's now a Hall of Fame linebacker. Bobby, I baptized him there at Tri-City, and so that was Darrell Porter, who was a Kansas City world champion and most valuable player for St. Louis of one of the World Series. And so, yes, I've had the privilege of meeting some of these people. They're just normal, everyday people, have problems just like the rest of us do, and really have the need of the Lord Jesus Christ like everybody has. I was glad to have the opportunity to talk to some of those people and try to give them something that's more worthwhile for them.
A lot of people would say, boy, you're at the pinnacle. You are enjoying all of this wealth and fame and success. Life is great.
Yeah. Well, and Darrell Porter actually came up here to Maranatha one time. He was a member of our church, a catcher for St. Louis, and then for the Royals. Came out of the drug culture and got saved, and wrote a book about his life and what the Lord had done in his life. And I know he came up here and gave a testimony one time for one of your businessmen's things or something that. So he was another one that a lot of people would probably know.
Wow. That's pretty cool. I mean, Lord opened the door for you to be involved in that, so you couldn't help but then be a fan, I guess.
Yes, and so that's why I'm looking for the three-peat. We'll see what happens. I don't know any of the present players.
The Chiefs are so good. I'm sure you've heard a few of them.
Yes.
Like Taylor Swift, I think, is on the Chiefs. Pretty much see her all the time now.
She's at the stadium, let's put it that way.
I guess so. Maybe she's a part owner, too. I don't know. But you become a fan when you live in a city like that because it's just overwhelming you all the time, all the media, all the signage and everything, and it's kind of fun to be a part of that.
But back when I was pastoring at Tri-City, they never were in the Super Bowl, and I was.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. Were they any good back then?
Not very good. And they never made the Super Bowl, and I was always told our folks, I said, I'd love for the Chiefs to make the Super Bowl for two reasons. I'd love for them to be able to reach the pinnacle of sports. But number two, I wanted to prove to them we'd have church even when the Super Bowl was going. Of course, now with the opportunity to record everying, there's no excuse anymore. But I'd read about these churches that they bring down the big screen and they'd have selling or passing out refreshments and all that. And I said, I just like them to be so I could prove to you all that we're going to still have church even if the Chiefs are in the Super Bowl.
That's real here in Wisconsin. The Packers have taken over the state, and I remember when I was in college, we went one weekend with a choir up to Green Bay, and we're in a little church up there. And I think there were many of us in the choir as there were in the audience that day. But they immediately after the service, they had church in the morning, but immediately after the service, they had a potluck in the fellowship hall. And I remember walking through there, but there was no room in the fellowship hall for people to eat. And in fact, all they had there was the tables with the food. And I thought, where are we going to go? And what happened was they all grabbed their food, went right back into the sanctuary, the hard pews, the wooden pews. They sat down, the screen came down, and the Packers game. Same crowd. And I would have to say a little more intensity, actually, being into the game. And they all just cheered and watched it together all afternoon.
You've experienced it. I've only heard about those things happen, but I've never seen it personally.
I don't understand it, but I've seen it happen.
Misplaced priorities,
I tell you what. Well, they didn't
sure.
not have church. They just added to it, I guess, a little bit. And that's kind of how it is up here. When I was down in Tampa Bay area serving the Lord with Christian Law Association for many years, we became Buccaneers fans, kind of added that instead of taking away from being a Bears fan, just added being a Bucs fan. And they were really good back then. And in fact, they went to the Super Bowl. And I can remember going to church Sunday night. My pastor was like you. He wasn't going to cancel for anything. And so I remember running out of church just trying not to get spoiled because somebody's always going to be like, hey. And I got all the way to my car when this junior high kid blurted out the score. And I said, well, you jerk, I was recording. So they didn't at least tell me the final score, but it was a bummer. So, well, that's all good and fun, and I appreciate your variety of interests, and you've had a very blessed life. You've had not only entrance into getting to know and meeting powerful people in the sports world, but also the political scene too. And I know you've met very high-ranking and befriended, the Attorney General at one point, and
that's
some
how
people
I really got involved in government. And he's the one of his staff members, John Ashcroft, was the one that put together the name AdvanceUSA.
Really?
Yeah. And so, I was the president of the American Association of Christian Schools for many years, but I've really got started in Kansas City because John Ashcroft was the governor of the state. And in God's providence, I rode on a plane back from one of the AACS meetings that you've been to there in D.C. back, and he was across the aisle from me. And I thought it looked like the governor, but I didn't really know for sure. And I said, excuse me, are you John Ashcroft? And he says, yes, I am. Why? Who are you? And I said, well, I'm Pastor Carl Herbster. And as soon as I said pastor, it was like, whoa. His dad was an evangelist, and he just started talking to me. We talked all the way back to Kansas City. He said, I have a Bible study every day down in the Capitol in the morning before I go to work. I'd like you to come down and participate with me. And so I did, just to see. And then he we got to know each other, became friends, and I actually had the privilege of being at his last Bible study in the Attorney General's office in Washington, D.C. And so he was a strong believer, committed to the Lord, committed to conservatism, and he's the one that helped me start AdvanceUSA, because in D.C. it's not what you know, it's who you know. It's relationships that you build.
Working that network to the next.
Exactly right. And now, by the grace of God, the Speaker of the House is the man who represents Southland Christian Camp, where my son Mike is the director of the camp. And both Mike and I worked with Mike Johnson before he was even a member of Congress. He was a constitutional lawyer and decided to run. And so we've known him for many, many years.
Well, he sure does get a lot of heat, doesn't he?
Oh,
you can't be in that position without having people throwing darts at you.
And the good thing that I like, and people ask me all the time because of knowing him personally, and I just like to tell him, he may not always do right, but I'll tell you, he wants to do right, and he's going to seek a lot of counsel. He's going to pray about it, and he's going to seek to do what he believes right, whether everybody else believes it or not. And so I'm glad that he is where he is, and I'm thankful that we have the opportunity to pray for people like that and try to befriend them. And again, they're just regular people. This is the thing I kind of keep wanting. They're nobody special. We're all sinners saved by grace, and we're all used in God's kingdom however he wants to use us. But people think of these folks as celebrities, and in some ways they are, obviously. But
they're powerful people.
But they're real people. They have issues that they have to deal with in their homes and their families, and they have the same temptations and maybe more when it comes to Washington, D.C. than we would have. And so we need to be praying. We're commanded to pray for those who have authority over us, but we need to definitely be praying for those that have these special places, because they can make a big difference in our country. And I'm excited about what's happening even as we speak.
Oh, well, it has been a week, huh? I feel like I've got 3 full-time jobs, and most of that's just watching all the media of what's going on, and it's been a flurry of activity this week as we've had the inauguration. As we record it today, it is the first week of a Trump presidency number 2. And it seems to me so far it's like Trump unleashed. Yes. I mean, he hit the ground running in a way that didn't happen the first time.
Well, he didn't know the players.
Yeah.
See that, and when you're not in the beltway of Washington, D.C., and you don't have the understanding of who's in it for the right reasons and who's in it for the wrong reasons. And there's both. You have genuine people in it for the right reasons, and then you have people that are there to enrich themselves and all the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, the pride of life that we read about in 1 John 2. And so he knows the players now. He knows the ones that are really going to help him with his agenda. And I told people after the first term with Donald Trump, I said, now he may not be the evangelical Christian that we would like for him to be, and I'm praying that he would, be someday, and the Lord clean up his language and all those sort of things. But I saw more accomplished for the cause of righteousness, the issues that we're concerned about, because righteousness exalts a nation. I saw more accomplished in his term than any president I've been involved with, and I've had the opportunity to be involved with several that really wanted to do some things, but just didn't have the nerve, I guess, to go ahead and do it. I mean, in the inauguration speech, to just say, hey, we're back. There's 2 genders, male and female. Just if nothing else would have been said, common sense, you'd think that everybody would know that.
Who thought you'd need to say that? But sure.
I know, but you sure. Of course, then he got beat up there at the prayer service for all that. But it's just good to know that we have some people up there that really do care about our country, and I'm thankful that I get a chance to be with some of them and help them, try to encourage them.
Well, I can't wait to unpack some of that a little bit and to talk about the ministry that you have on Capitol Hill and with some of the very real people who are there and ministering and serving with them. But this is the On Mission podcast, and you have had a life that has taken lots of twists and turns. Fortunately, you've made every decision right all the way along, I'm sure.
I wish I had.
But you've learned from each of those, right or wrong, and I want to see and just trace God's working in that, and we usually start that out with kind of a big question, and that is, as you sit here today, what is your mission in life?
My mission in life is to serve God and to help other people serve God. I love people. I love discipleship. I love mentoring. And so I want to be somebody that's involved in the Lord's work and serving, and then I want to help other people that want to do the same thing accomplish that. And I've had the privilege to do that in a lot of different arenas, and I'm very thankful about that. But that's what I'm all about. It's about serving the Lord and helping other people to serve the Lord.
Yeah, but how are you going to ever become a big deal if that's your mission? I mean, that doesn't seem like that's going to help you rise in the ranks and become a well-known big-time mover and shaker.
Yeah, and that's not important to me. And I think early in life it was, and I met a lot of big movers and shakers and people that were known by people, and I saw how miserable they were when they were going after that. That was their mission statement, the things of this world, and they're miserable.
Yep.
And I'm thinking, why would I go after that? And that was how the Lord really showed me to consider the Lord's work and go back and preach, and that, because I was teaching a Sunday school class and was starting to really get involved in helping disciple other people. The pastor was utilizing me as a businessman, and it was so fulfilling. It was so rewarding to see your life count in somebody else's life. Just really excited me. And so I surrendered and went back to school and prepared to preach, and of course had that opportunity with the church ministry, school ministry, and then with the American Association of Christian Schools, and now with AdvanceUSA, or like you were reading my hobby, I get the chance to help a lot of churches, get them matched up with somebody to be the pastor of their church now in my older years, or vice versa, to have those pastors out there that really want to serve the Lord, but you have to match the man and the ministry together to be able to do that. And I love doing that. I just enjoy ministering for the Lord. So
it all starts when we come to know the Lord. Were you raised in a Christian home and a Christian from an early age, or how did that take place?
No, I didn't come to know the Lord till I was 18. I never heard the gospel. My older brother, Roy, went to play basketball at Taylor University in Upland, Indiana. I went to Indiana Central to play basketball at the Indiana Central University, but his coach led him to the Lord, my older brother. And then he asked me a penetrating question. He said, "Carl, are you going to heaven?" And I said, "Well, I hope so." And he knew enough to say, "Well, the Bible says you can know so." And I thought, really? That's amazing. You could know that you're going. I thought it was, you didn't know till you died, because if you did enough good stuff to outweigh your bad stuff, like a lot of people I think that I'd get to go to heaven. And so I read the book of Romans, and Romans chapter 3, verse 28 says, "Therefore we conclude that a man is justified by faith without the deeds of the law." And of course, a lot of other things were sinners, or Romans 3 and all the things. But that was when the Holy Spirit spoke to me and said, "Listen, this is not about you. This is about the Lord Jesus Christ." And I put my faith in him. And it's interesting because I was dating my wife that's now been married. We've been married for 54 years. I wrote her. We have the letters that shows what God was doing in my heart. She has the letters. And she had been saved as a child, but hadn't been in a church where she could grow. So we had the joy as a young couple of growing together, learning the Word together and practicing it together.
Wow. And so how did that change your goals or perspective at that point? You said, "I went there to play basketball." So obviously academics was not your number one priority in making that choice. Well, they paid
for my schooling, so
okay.
I was a pretty good student too.
Yeah.
But
what were you studying?
I was to math
originally?
Education.
Math ed.
Yeah.
Okay. And so did you stick with that, or how did it
I did.
progress?
When I got saved, two things happened. Basketball wasn't important. It just wasn't that important anymore. And I hurt myself. I had an injury. I had an ankle injury. I put on quite a bit of weight over the summer, and so it wasn't as important to me to get in shape.
Okay.
I now had this girlfriend that I just wanted to marry. I didn't do anything else. And so
I've been talking to some students like that too around
here. So we got married my junior year of college, but I didn't have any expenses because my schooling was paid, so it was fine. We were able to make it, and the Lord then brought along 3 children pretty quickly.
That was back in the olden days. That's not something you want to do now. Getting married as a junior. All right, you got to wait. Okay, back to the regular
unless
program.
you have your schooling all paid for, and you know how you're going to take care of it. I graduated. I just want you to know I did graduate.
Okay, good.
And went on and got some other advanced degrees, as you know. But what happened? I was trying to climb the corporate ladder. Went to work for Procter & Gamble Corporation, and thought making money was what I needed because Mark and Michael, our twin sons, who a lot of people know, they were born when our oldest son, was 19 months. So we had 3 little boys pretty quickly.
Instant family.
And so we had to, I needed to make money. But then little by little, as I climbed the corporate ladder, ended up in Chicago in business with Martin Marietta Corporation and started making some good money. And again, seeing all these people and how miserable they were, I said, there's got to be more to life than this. And God then put me in the ministry, and I'm thankful.
Yeah, that's amazing calling that come later in life. A lot of times these days, young men called into pastoral ministry, it's usually teen-ish years. A lot of times camp ministry has to do with that.
And that's wonderful.
Or a pastor.
My sons were all called into ministry as teenagers, so that's wonderful.
Yeah, so for you, it meant going back to school. Mm-hmm. In those days, there probably wasn't as much online opportunities or correspondence opportunities, so you had to kind of adjust.
And that's how I came in contact with Community Baptist Church, because being an Indiana boy, I went back to seminary at Grace Seminary in Winona Lake, Indiana.
Okay.
But I wanted a good church, and so I started attending Community Baptist Church in South Bend, and they were starting a Christian school. My degree was in education. And the pastor said, we're starting a school. My wife and daughter are going to be helping, but we need, a man to lead this school. And I qualified as a man. So
there you go.
So then I knew what I was. And so that's what happened. Then I got involved there at the school and then just started growing and seeing things that I needed to do to help me in my spiritual walk.
So you kind of default became a leader, and was that, in a sense, your first organizational leadership role?
It was. I obviously secular business. I was a manager for Martin Marietta in Chicago, and so I was in leadership from the standpoint of secular business. But that was my first leadership when it came to ministry.
Mm-hmm. And God obviously started opening doors. Your pastoral role is pastors deal with a very interesting mix of organizational leadership, but also the spiritual side, the personal side, the sermon preparation, all those different facets. It's an incredibly complex job that many people don't really have an appreciation for just how hard that is. And that's probably part of why your ministry now in being able to help come alongside pastors in their personal development, discipleship, and also helping churches identify pastors to take place. You have that personal insight, don't you?
Well, I have a lot of experience in a lot of different areas of ministry because we were a multifaceted church. And so church is church. The Bible lays that out, but it makes it possible that I can understand a small church, because we started some churches in town and out of our church, and so we were able to see what a small church is like, but also then to understand the multifaceted, having the Christian school and having some of the other ministries that we had. That was also a big help, I think.
Huge undertaking to start a Christian school, to run or operate a ministry of that scope and complexity, and then alongside that be the pastor. Tremendous pressures from all different directions, financial and just dealing with individuals and dealing with their kids.
Well, and as you know, in leadership, it's not you doing everything. It's you getting good people to come alongside and do it with you. Yeah. The things you have learned, you commit to faithful men who will then teach others also. So that's really, if it wasn't for all the wonderful people I served with, we wouldn't be able to have done what we have done.
Well, the ministry at Tri-City was a phenomenal work, and I remember the first time I heard about it as a kid. I was at Nationals, and for AACS, and we had only made it to nationals one time out of the state of Illinois. It was a very competitive state at that time with Rockford and Kankakee and Calvary Normal and all these schools that dominated that. Our academy here in Wisconsin is spoiled because they feel like, well, we're the only band at the thing, so we always win.
Win the state.
Yeah, we won the state again. You were the only band. So back in my day, we had to really earn it. And we got down there one time my senior year, and we had maybe 11 of us, in this small ensemble. And so we went in a van, I think, and we get down there, one of those death trap 15-passenger vans. And we got down there, and here comes Tri-City rolling in with 3 buses, and each bus had a luggage trailer at the back of it. And I thought,
how well I can
wow,
remember
they are the big time, man. I tell you what.
And we always had new buses too, because I had heard all the stories of the broken down buses. So I always wanted to have, at least for our road trips, we wanted to have buses that were still under warranty, so we didn't have to worry about that. And we would rotate them through, and we'd end up taking them to Mexico when they were really, because we had ministries in Mexico, and so they loved having our used buses down in Mexico.
Well
We'd
taken
wear
care
them
of.
out. But when you're in Kansas City, and we had to travel a long distance to get to like-minded schools, and we really wanted our young people being with like-minded young people, because we wanted them to see that example that they could get from other young people.
A lot of students and graduates from that ministry over the years would have been here at Maranatha, and I'll tell you, when I got to college, and would be talking to some peer, hey, where'd you go to school? If I found out, I went to Tri-City, I thought, man, I'm so jealous. That was amazing.
we were blessed, and I'm just so thankful that I had the privilege of pastoring
my former co-host John Sheely, one of your proteges, and speaks so highly of that preparation in his life as well. So we're obviously very thankful for the legacy, long legacy of that work as well.
And we're very thankful for the ministry that Maranatha's had in the lives of our family members. Because
you've had a pile of grandkids here at Maranatha.
We only have 2 grandchildren here now, so we're down to the minimum.
It's a trickle.
But we had one time we had 7 here at the same time, and grandchildren, and now how exciting it is to see how well they have been trained. You see what the Lord is doing in their lives now. One of the things I should have put down for hobby probably was traveling to see our grandkids. And I love, and I have a couple of the grandkids, that are pastoring, and I enjoy going and spending time helping them in some of their endeavors too. But it's really exciting to see how you can partner with churches and educational institutions that have the same philosophy, have the same concept, and really get that extra help that we all need. And so we're very grateful for the things that they learned here at Maranatha, and the service opportunities, ministry opportunities, and trusting that the 2 that are here right now will continue. We got 1 graduating this year, so we'll be down to 1.
Oh boy!
So I bet. But he's only a freshman, so we'll be able to come back.
We'll have a few years. All right.
Yes.
And he's following in Grandpa's footsteps and Dad's footsteps as a basketball player. So that's a good. Is he math ed? I don't know.
No. Okay. He's a Bible major.
Well, we'll take that.
That's what I thought you were talking about. He was following our steps as being a preacher, which that was something that I never. I didn't want to ever have daddy called preachers. I didn't want my sons to be preachers because their dad was a preacher. I wanted them to do it because God wanted them to be, and so I think they feel the same way about their sons. But we're very thankful when the Lord does call them, of course, because we love it. We think it's a fabulous way to spend your life in something that's eternal rather than something that's temporal.
The basketball team is getting ready to this summer travel out and minister alongside your son Matt out in Hong Kong.
Yes.
And he's putting together an itinerary for them to do clinics and ministry in some of the local churches there. And this is something that Mark and I have been talking about it when he was here full time, and how we could orchestrate and make this happen. And
that's wonderful.
So really, and that's a very key thing for us in terms of designing ministry opportunities for those groups that you would not normally associate. So a basketball team, I went with the soccer team to Kyrgyzstan to do soccer ministry.
And isn't it amazing how the kind of crowds you can get for a sporting event and give them the gospel versus just having a church service and try to give them
people
the gospel.
who would never darken the door.
It's wonderful.
Yeah.
And the contacts you make from that, then the missionaries can follow up on. And that's what it's all about.
Well, and we tell the teams. So we have ladies volleyball and soccer are going to Grand Cayman this summer. We have a nursing group, a medical group that'll be headed to South America. We have a music ministry group that's going out. And the idea is whatever talent or interest God's given you, you can use that in ministry.
Amen.
And that is the kind of thing that helps to spread the gospel. What we tell them, listen, when you go to the field, we're going to have a plan and we're going to prepare. But hold on, because life is going to throw some things at us. We're going to be flexible. And if God opens the door, man, we're here to do it. And we're going to say yes to ministry opportunities. That's a short period of time. But what I've noticed about your life in particular is that God just has opened doors and you have said, well, okay.
Not always just with me. For instance, I talked about Southwind Christian Camp. That was a ministry that used to be a Bible Memory Association camp. And somebody came to me and said, they're getting rid of that camp. You need to take that camp over, and you ought to have it. And I thought, I don't need a camp. All I could see was time and money. And this was in Louisiana. We were in Kansas City. We had Arkansas
exactly
in between.
Next door.
And I said, what in the world are we talking about? But I've always been one in leadership that felt like you need to get a multitude of counselors and never say no to anything. You pray about it, seek it out. So here I took some, the deacons down with me to check it out, and some of them got excited and came back. And I said, but we don't have anybody to run that camp. That's way down there. And one of my deacons raised his hand and said, "Here am I, send me." That was his exact words.
Wow.
"Here am I, send me." And all the deacons started cheering. It was like we were in a ball game. Yeah, let's do it, Pastor. Let's do it. And I said, "Oh yeah, let's do it." I knew it was going to be my responsibility to oversee it. But now I go there and see, what the Lord has done. I'm so thankful that we took it to the church, and the church voted for us to do it. And I'm just so thankful we did. But it wasn't me saying we need to have a camp. It was the Lord saying we needed to have a camp.
But what a absolute strategic location that it has.
It's been amazing.
And, I've had a chance to go down and see firsthand what God's been doing. And we have so many of our students that go down every summer and counsel and help, and then graduates down there serving. And it's been amazing. That just out of the blue, God opens a door. Sometimes on Sunday afternoon, I'll be reviewing my schedule for the week, and I'll see a little blank spot, and I'll think, oh, boy, I wonder what the Lord's going to put there, And you just have no idea who's going to knock or who's going to call.
But you have to be willing. I guess that's the bottom line.
Yeah.
We just always have to be willing to do whatever the Lord wants us to do. I use the Apostle Paul all the time as an illustration. He gets saved on the road to Damascus, and right away, here's his heart. What do you want me to do? And that's the attitude I want to have no matter how old I get. As long as I have strength and energy, I still want to say, Lord, what do you want me to do? And be willing to do whatever he wants me to do.
So here we are in the prime of your golden age, right? Like a lot of guys your age would say, I've done it. I've built what I want to build. I've done what I want to do. It's time for me to relax and retire. I don't really sense that that's been your mode.
I don't find retirement in the Bible.
Okay.
And what do people do when they retire? They try to do things that they like to do. I like to serve in the ministry, so
you're just doing
what you would do anyway. I get to do what I love to do.
But that's not boring. You have kept busy, and the Lord's given you good health and access and things that are meaningful.
And I have a wonderful wife that has just always been there with me.
Amen.
And
Amen.
It's finding that right helper, that right person to come alongside. And
how important is that?
And it's just been, when you have that kind of relationship, because she sometimes says, I'm just hanging on. I'm just hanging on.
Well, you have no idea what you're getting into when you're at that stage of life, when you have to make the decision to get into it. And when you're looking for somebody that's going to truly be a life partner to you, probably the main thing is, no matter what adventure life brings and sends along, we're in this together.
Yep.
And you can't say, well, are you the type of person that wants to live in this area? Or do you want to do this? And I'm marrying a pastor, I'm marrying a lawyer in my wife's case.
Yeah.
But man, life just has a way of, God knows, but we don't.
Yep. Yep.
And the commitment demonstrated 54 years together, faithfully serving, but in very different modes and very different types and phases of life.
And that's to be able to be that flexible in so many different things. We lost our daughter-in-law to cancer when she was 39 years of age. And so that kind of moved us from the full-time pastorate to minister to our family, because we've always said family is first with us. If that's our first responsibilities to our family. So we actually went and lived with my son and his 5 children. So she helped take care of the kids, and that's when I really started to say, okay, what am I going to do with the rest of my life, and started AdvanceUSA and started going to Washington, D.C. and some of the things
I did not know the connection of that.
Yeah, that was because we had talked about in our retirement from the pastorate we might do missions work and that sort of thing. But when Julie passed and Matt had 5 children to take care of, and we just said, this is our priority. And so I traveled and spoke and did different ministries out of there. But that's how Mark Meadows, do you know that name? Mark Meadows, who used to be the chief of staff for Trump, was the very first the representative that I got to know in North Carolina, because he represented the wilds of North Carolina. And I just saw him 2 weeks ago. Again, I see him.
What's he up to now?
He's working with Senator DeMint on a Conservative Leadership Institute. They recruit conservative candidates. They recruit staff workers for conservative members of Congress. They're real busy right now because they're trying to staff all these offices. Because if you don't have good staff members, you could have a lot of problems.
Well, that's what they mean when they say the swamp.
Else. Yeah, that's
they got all these bureaucrats in all these different places.
But he and Jim DeMint, who was the senator from South Carolina, they have this organization helping with the conservative cause and with conservative members.
So in the minutes that we have left, I'd like to find out a little bit more about AdvanceUSA.
Yeah.
What is it that you're doing there, and how can people get behind it?
Yeah. Well, people in Congress or people even in local government, they don't want to hear from some paid lobbyist, or they don't want to hear from somebody that's representing somebody else. They really want to hear from their constituency.
Okay.
And so what we seek to do in AdvanceUSA, and Ashcroft was the one that said this, is to recruit people from the local constituency of the different members of Congress. And when there's a need for somebody to talk to that office, we have that person talk to that office. Not me, not somebody else that's in Washington, D.C., but we get them from the district. And so we have a network of people around the country, and leaders of churches, leaders of businesses, leaders of homeschool organizations. We have different leaders around the country that we recruit from specific congressional districts. And we try to have them, either they already have a relationship with their member of Congress, or we help them build that relationship. So when you need to get to a member of Congress, you have somebody that can get there from the home district that this person trusts, this member of Congress trusts, that will say, we're concerned about this bill, or we're concerned about this language, or we're concerned, instead of it being somebody that's a paid lobbyist up there in Washington, D.C. So it's an advocacy. We call them ambassadors. We have ambassadors all over the country that they're ambassadors for Christ, first of all. We want to we want to represent Christ. We want to be a witness for Christ. We want to have the opportunity to share with people the gospel of Jesus Christ. But we're ambassadors for righteousness, too, because righteousness exalts a nation and sin is a reproach to any people. So we deal with those issues that are righteous issues, the family issues, the life issues, the morality issues, the judicial issues, and the religious freedom issues. And those are the things that we zero in on. And so in any bill, you have some of those kind of things that are going on, especially now this one big, beautiful bill. There's going to be a lot of stuff in there that has to be evaluated from a biblical point of view to make sure that we don't get something thrown at us that's not righteousness. So
there's so much in what you just said that is absolutely vital. You've got Christians out there that say, well, we shouldn't be involved in politics. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a boy, that's a wrong way to look at things. When we have in this nation a heritage to preserve for another generation, I think that's a stewardship responsibility. When we have, when God has designed the world to work in a way that is going to maximize freedom, that it's going to maximize accountability, and that's going to maximize and raise up as many people as possible out of poverty and give them the tools to provide for themselves and their families, and to have a freedom of conscience to choose to follow God. That matches our doctrine and what God's Word had to say, but it also aligns with how God made the world. And you're talking about a level of involvement in politics that goes far beyond just voting for a candidate, but that would say, I need to stay informed, and I shouldn't take things for granted and say, oh, well, my guy's in office, so now everything's good, or my guy's not in office, so now everything's bad, but rather to be informed at the level that
and we really
stay involved.
I like to call it advocacy more than politics, because whoever gets elected, do I pray and work to get good people elected? Yes. But whoever gets elected, we have to work with those people. And so it's a matter of building relationships with these different people so that you can have an influence for righteousness. And the best people to do that in Wisconsin are Wisconsins. It's not somebody that's from Indiana, where I base out of now.
Every September when we go to D.C. for the AACS National Legislative Conference, about 80% of the time I'm sitting on the plane next to Ron Johnson, our senator, and a guy that's been on campus here to keep us informed about what's going on. He doesn't campaign here, but he comes here as the senator and informs us and the student body as to what's going on and what we ought to be thinking and aware of. And he's very receptive because he recognizes, these guys are here. They're not going to give up. They're not just here when they want something. They come when. And
then when I go in and see him, and I just say, well, Maranatha? And they, I know Maranatha. And he does, by the way, knows Maranatha. And then I all of a sudden have instant credibility with him because I know Maranatha. And so that's what happens. And by having people in these different areas that have that relationship with their member. So thank you for what you're doing. Keep it up, by the way.
Well, because and sometimes you feel like you're not doing anything. Like, Pastor Loggins will be there with me, and usually it's that Wednesday of that week. Then we'll say, well, you want to go up to the Hill and see if we can get in and talk to the different ones. We always try to get in to talk to our other senator, who is a very, very liberal senator, and she has never let us even come in to talk. And, we say, hey, we'd just like to come in and chat with you, pray for you, find out how we can pray more knowledgeably for you. No interest at all. And it's a sad thing. And that if there's one thing that's a big difference in who's in power, the administration, it's the level of access and participation that we have. I would anticipate this September would be a lot different than last year.
Oh, yes.
And we may get a different level of briefing, maybe a White House, invite. For some reason, AACS isn't invited in whenever there's a liberal administration.
Yes. It's like I used to go to the White House. I try to go to D.C. every month, and I used to go to the White House almost every trip there under the previous Trump administration and knew a lot of the staffers and everything. And so hopefully we'll be back in that kind of relationship again. It's goes back to it's not what you know, it's who you know. And because we the values that they're talking about are the same values that we have. But you just can't assume it. You have to keep in touch and make sure, because even in the Christian community, sometimes you'll be surprised how what some people will accept that we wouldn't accept in our biblical Christianity.
Or that they assume we want things that we really don't want. They're always very surprised in a friendly administration. They say, what would you like us to do? We got billions of dollars. We'll give you this money.
We don't want it.
Would you please leave us alone? That's what we want. That's all we want. Just leave us alone. And they say, what do you mean? We're going for universal this or paid that. Honestly, just leave us alone. The money would ruin us anyway. And maybe they think that's a little weird, but that's really all we would like to have. Let me ask you two specific things. You could help educate me, our audience, two specific things that I'm really kind of curious about with the Trump administration. There's been a flurry of activity, hundreds of executive orders and setting things back to what you might call just normal. in most ways, like you mentioned about genders and things like that. There's been some kind of wild stuff, amusing, like we now have a Gulf of America instead of a Gulf of Mexico, which I'm here for it. That's fine. I'm good with that. By the way, Mexico is in America, all right, if we remember that. But so is Canada. But we look at that activity. Two things I want to ask you about. One is the appointment of RFK Jr. in the HHS, the health side of things. And my concern with him as an appointee, I mean, he's got a lot of great stuff, I think, trying to make things healthy again and get some of this poison out of the foods and stuff. You're like, why was that in there in the first place? Like, we knew that caused cancer. Why are we letting it go into the cereal for the kids? So that stuff just seems like common sense. But he's not pro-life. And that makes a difference as to how an administration is led. And guys say, well, you know what? And I feel like President Trump's take on it is, I gave you the Dobbs decision through the justices I appointed. Roe v. Wade's gone. It's up to the states, so the federal government's out of that business. But I feel like they're missing something there, and it makes a difference that someone really stands for life.
Just last week, there was a Born Alive Protection Act before the Senate, which is a bill that passed the House that says if a baby is born after a botched abortion alive, you have to save that baby. In the House of Representatives, there was only one member of the Democratic Party that voted for it, only one.
Wow.
In the Senate last week, there was none. But already that was brought up in this new Congress because there are some very strong pro-life people in the Congress. It used to be, you could say, both on the Democratic side and the Republican side. Now it's pretty much just the Republican side. Yeah. But that's going to be an issue. It's an issue with Trump. It's an issue with...
How is that controversial? This is a baby.
Yeah.
There's no debate.
No.
There's no grace period after a baby is born when we can say, you know what, change my mind.
Yeah, but where Trump has to be convinced that we need to do something nationally, not just the states, because even though taking it back, the states did save a lot of babies because states can now enforce their laws. Our new governor in Indiana just came out strong that we're going to be enforcing the law that we have instead of just having it, because you can have it and not enforce it.
Well,
and
here
so
in Wisconsin,
that's something he's got to be convinced
we
of.
have a pretty conservative legislature, but a very liberal governor who vetoes every single thing that gets passed. And so you can return it to the states, but babies in Wisconsin are
not protected,
losing their lives at the same rate that they did before.
And
Dobbs.
I know that the heartbeat bill is going to be introduced again this year into the Senate. And of all people, Senator Lindsey Graham has been doing that for, I don't know, maybe the last 13 years or so, where he every year he's got more co-sponsors, and he's a good friend of the president. So who knows what might happen? I just say we just need to keep praying and keep working. But that's not a good. Anybody that's not pro-life is not a good pick as far as I'm concerned. That's one of our core issues.
Yeah.
And I mean, God is the giver and taker of life. We're playing God when we start taking over.
Well, it was puzzling to me to see the Heritage Foundation come out very strongly in favor of his confirmation, and to say even running ads in favor of it.
See, I didn't know that. That's the first I've heard that.
And I can't understand, because here's a conservative organization. I reached out to some colleagues that are there, and I said, isn't this a complete betrayal of your
of our
platform?
Biblical values, yeah.
And they said, well, we've received assurances from the Trump administration that behind closed doors that he has told RFK, hands off abortion. Okay, so what? We have forced neutrality. I mean, that is very different than what we feel like. As you said, there are some protections that need to be put in place on the life issue. So that's number one. Number two, I know is near and dear to your heart, education. There's been a lot of talk about eliminating the federal Department of Education. And then other people who probably think that schools around America actually depend on the federal Department of Education for things. What are your thoughts on the prospect of ending that And is that a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Is it realistic?
Well, it's
what do you
a good
think?
thing to get the federal government out of a lot of things, including education. So, yes, I'm 100% for getting. Now, I think where then the question is, where do we take education? It's in the states. That's where it's supposed to be anyhow.
Sure.
But where I want it's with the parents.
Yeah.
So, and then you get into the whole discussion of parental choice in education, which, again, every state is dealing with. And what the Trump administration is talking about is block granting money back to the states that will promote some type of parental choice in education in their state. And, of course, Wisconsin was one of the first states to have parental choice programs.
Very much thanks to one of our board members named Mike Dean, who actually led the charge in the Milwaukee pilot program.
Wow.
And what's fascinating about this issue here in Wisconsin is that it's actually our minority communities who are very much behind school choice, because some of the worst failing schools are in the inner cities, which trap young people into those failing schools. And the moms, you don't mess with moms.
Yeah.
And you know, moms will get you, you know. and they did. And so our governor has almost no choice but to be for choice in schools, because it is a big chunk of his constituency that wants it too.
And
kind of crosses
you got
the
it
aisle.
passed when you had a Republican governor.
Of course, yeah.
And so to get rid of it's much harder.
It's all hard-coded.
Once you have it, it's harder to get rid of it as long as you keep the legislature in that regard. But I think you're going to see a lot of pilot programs, even though there's states that have strong programs, and there's an organization called ALEC, American Legislative Exchange Council, where they swap bills. The state legislators do that. So I think there's going to be a lot of things taking place. And I've told people, he said, remember when Trump said, and all these presidents through the years have said that, okay, we're going to put the capital of Israel back in Jerusalem and put our embassy back, and nobody did it.
Nobody did it.
Well, Trump did it. So I wouldn't. I mean, he says he's going to do it.
I really don't think he's playing. And one of the things that made me realize he might be serious wasn't the person he picked for the department chair, but his former, which is Betsy DeVos, posted a picture of herself on social media last week in front of the department and said, basically, shut this place down. And I thought, if anybody knows and should be a dyed-in-the-wool believer in the value of a federal Department of Education, for us as a college, it's almost unthinkable knowing how entangled it is with the accreditors and the funding and the Pell Grants and the loans. And I just say to people, look, all that stuff's going to continue. They'd have to figure it all out.
Question.
But what we're really talking about is this massive bureaucracy that stands in the way of innovation rather than allowing it, and just letting people make decisions for themselves, like you're talking about parents with their children.
Well, and that's the biblical principles. Parents are responsible for their children, so let's empower parents to make those right decisions instead of trying to take over for parents. And that's what's happened in a lot of school systems is, you feed them, you diaper them, and you take care of them, clothe them, you send them off to school, we'll educate them, you stay away from us, stay out. No, if parents want to use a school system to help them, great. But my grandchildren, all of them were home educated. Every one of them that have done well at Maranatha were home educated. Now they have, of course, I think, special mothers, so they were
obviously.
And again, it wasn't my sons; they just picked well. But and so there's a big home education movement too.
And by the way, several of those grandchildren are in our nursing program,
That's right.
which is one of the hardest academic and hard science programs you could have. So a lot of times people shy away. Homeschooling, they won't get the science, they won't get the, give me a break. And they were leaders in the student body. They have all the socialization they need, that myths about homeschooling. We could spend a whole episode just on that. But let me ask you a question, though. And I know you have probably some strong feelings and done a lot of thinking about this. Is there any such thing as neutral education? In other words, just send them off here. We'll educate them. It won't be a God thing, but it won't be an it'll just be neutral education.
Never. That's my philosophy. The teacher is always coming from a philosophical base, always. And you can't. Whether you like it or not, you have a belief. You have a belief system. All of us have a belief system. So there's no way you can have neutral teaching. There's neutral materials. There are things that you can't say the Bible speaks specifically to. But those things, how those things are applied, I think, always comes from a philosophical base. And then Colossians 2:8 says, "Beware, lest any man spoil you through philosophy and vain deceit." So I say it's very important who's doing the teaching. And so, in my estimation, there's no neutral education.
Yeah, and that farce of the idea of, well, this is a secular education, and so you can teach them God at church and in your home, but here we're just going to have a godless program. And I think if people would understand that, it sure would make the choices a lot simpler.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and because you have charter schools that are becoming popular, where they're saying they'll have that neutral, and then if you want to throw in a Bible class after school or whatever, but no, you can't have it. And so that's why I think the whole matter of parental choice, and that's going to happen. It's just how it's going to happen, and then we have to be careful about the strings that can be attached because of them saying it's aid to the school. And that's why doing it with the parents is always best, because they're the taxpayers, instead of doing it with the institution. Yeah. And when it comes to the vouchers or the ESAs and the different funding strategies, all those are doing is just letting people keep basically the money that they have earned and make a choice as to where they want to send it. And the people in Washington, D.C. that really are against Christianity and against parents and against churches, they think that we're already subsidized because we have a tax exemption.
Yeah, they want to view that as federal funding.
They already think we should be getting strings because we have a tax deduction. And we have a tax deduction because our founders and the people thought we want these educational and spiritual institutions to flourish because it's good for our society.
Right.
But they look at it, you don't have to be taking a check. You're getting a check because you don't have to pay taxes.
It's bizarre circular logic, like that percentage belongs to them by right or something. It's a really interesting thing.
But thank the Lord, that's not the majority right now. So by God's grace, we still have a little bit of breathing room, and I'm thankful for that.
Well, keep up the work. You're doing as much to educate those folks in power as you are the rest of us on how we can participate. I appreciate so much your
I'll just give my
ministry.
website, AdvanceUSA.org. People can go there and see how they could get involved if they want to get involved, AdvanceUSA. But I want people to be involved that are a good testimony for the Lord Jesus Christ, and people who are willing to build that relationship with their member of Congress. And it takes time and it takes some work to do that. But once you have it until the next election.
I think about the real giants here in the state of Wisconsin. Marv Munyon was a champion for Christian education back in his day. Jelaine Appling for life issues and for Christian education. Mike Dean I mentioned, and there could be a whole host of other names. But those folks are moving off the scene, imminently, or have retired, and now it's time for another generation to stand up, like say, okay, here am I,
and
send me.
I guess this is a great time to do it too, because at least you got some friendly folks.
Let's go. Well, thank you so much for giving us your time today, and it's always a joy to see you on campus and are out and about when we run into each other. We ran into each other in Florida a couple of years ago. You just never know, and that's a real joy and a blessing to see how God's using you.
Thank you for what you're doing through Maranatha. It's a joy. To see what God has done in the lives of my grandchildren. I know that's multiplied over and over again through other families, but I have a special interest in those grandchildren that are been educated very, very well in a nice, loving atmosphere, and it's a joy to see what God has done and continues to do through Maranatha.
Amen. Thank you for listening to On Mission, a podcast produced by Maranatha Baptist University. Maranatha is different. In a world turned upside down, boldly standing for Christ certainly draws attention. Christian young people need godly mentors who will affirm their faith and build on the foundation laid by their parents and pastors. That is the Maranatha difference. While secular colleges seem devoted to destroying the faith of their students, MBU provides students with a nurturing environment to study, practice, and grow their faith, and develop lifelong relationships with Christian friends. Maranatha can prepare you for whatever vocation God is calling you to pursue. Our academic programs are built upon the timeless foundation of God's Word and taught by loving faculty who invest personally in the lives of every student. Maranatha is different, and that's a good thing. Find out more at mbu.edu. And for information about our podcast guests and to listen to all the previous episodes, visit mbu.edu/podcast. Join us again next week as we examine what keeps leaders on mission.